Alrighty, we're just gonna get right into it today. For those of us who actually have lives, me not included, there's a certain routine that we get into, that you get into, those of you who have lives. And that routine ends up taking over a part of who you are. Now let me explain this. When you go to work or you go to school, there's a part of you that you leave behind to deal with those tasks. It's like when you're playing a game or some kind of sport. You are in it to win it, so to speak. If it's being done for a certain prize or a certain prestige, namesake, if it's just for fun, obviously you're not going to take it too seriously. But when you're doing it for a specific reason, you become one-track minded. And this is not good at all. When we become one-track minded, we lose out all the substance around us. And we forget to question the things that we do and why we do them. We are simply just acting out of instinct at that point, because we've buried who we are under our motives. And those motives can be internally or externally influenced. Whatever those motives are, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what you're ignoring when you're in that state of mind. And the majority of people are in that state of mind. We start forgetting why we're here, or we never even question it to begin with. We simply exist. And I've talked about this in other testimonies, which I have not posted here. But most of us are simply existing. We're not really living. And I want to go over the connection that we have to each other. And most of us take that connection for granted, when in my opinion, it's the most important thing about living, about being here. Why should we be the only beings on this planet who have consciousness and yet decide in and of ourselves to ignore one another? There's no excuse for us to ignore one another. Absolutely no excuse. And yet, we do it every day, and it's so easy to do it too. You just let people pass you by on the street without a second thought. And that's the beauty of this. That's the irony of this. We do have thought. We're not just robots, mindlessly going from place to place, from perspective to perspective. We're actually consciously making decisions. We're not animals, and yet we act like animals. We're not driven by instinct, and yet we let it drive us. We let our flesh drive us. What feels good? What tastes good? What smells good? What can I get? What material things can I possess that might fulfill my happiness? Or maybe just get me through the day? I mean, that's really all we're thinking about the majority of the time, is what's going to get me to the next new thing in my life, to the next new pinnacle. And each person's pinnacle changes from person to person, because not everyone is the same. We all have different dreams and different desires. And I think the problem with humanity right now is that we're not looking at each other as kin, even though we are the only beings on this earth, and possibly within the entire universe. Don't quote me on that, because that's just my theory, who have the ability to say yes or no to something. Animals don't and can't do that. If an animal is hungry, they do everything they can to eat. The animal doesn't just sit in a corner and decide that they're not going to try to eat. They just don't do that. They're driven purely by instinct. Whether they're hungry or they're thirsty, we are not like that. We can make a decision to fast. We can make a decision to be gluttons. but we can make a decision. So why are we continuing to make decisions that hurt each other? I mean, when you look at a pack of wolves, or a pride of lions, the only time you will ever see fighting amongst those groups of animals is over leadership. But the individual people, if we consider the majority of those packs as normal individuals, just simple individuals, everyday individuals, we consider the majority of those packs the people or the populace. And they don't fight with each other. They work together for a common goal, and that's to survive. However, you look in our communities, and not only are our leaders fighting, but we're fighting amongst ourselves. So who is the more evolved species here? Now, I've heard lots of talk of evolution, but as far as I'm concerned, animals have nailed it right on the head with family and community. Animals are more supportive of each other than we are of our own kind. Shouldn't that say something about us? Doesn't that say something about us? Doesn't that say something about our growth or lack thereof? These are the kinds of things that we don't question. These are the kinds of things that go unnoticed because we're so busy caught up in our own selfishness that we ignore everything that's going on around us. We ignore each other. And we are all we have on this planet. There's nothing else for us here except each other, and yet we continue to ignore one another and hurt one another because we refuse to get to know ourselves, because we let the expectations of a collective environment decide who we are. We don't have minds of our own anymore. Owns. We don't have minds of our own anymore. Who are we? Who are you? Are you just an ornament? Another ornament on some tree somewhere that's considered this tree of life? Are you just another useless individual? Who are you? Why are you here? And why do you do the things that you do? In my opinion, whether you're pink, purple, blue, or orange, and no matter the language you speak, you're still the only beings on this planet whom have the ability to say yes and no. Animals don't have that luxury. No other being here has that luxury. We're the only ones who are able to decide. So why do we continue to hate one another? And some of you may be thinking, well, we don't hate each other. Okay, maybe you don't hate each other, but you're not doing anything to tell anyone that you care for one another. I'm not talking about just your closed circle of friends or family. We need to start trying to actually care for one another and not have it under the guise of charity. We need to do it because it's right, not because it's convenient. It'd be all for nothing if all we ever did was do things for people because we were going to get something out of it, some kind of notoriety or public admonishment in some way. We need to, as a race of individuals, that's right, individuals, because we are all unique, we need to start caring for one another the right way, not the way that governments and society have corrupted and perverted. Look inside of yourself and wonder why things aren't better. Wonder why the things that you do don't substantialize what you feel inside. That void is always going to be there until you own up to your own individuality. The next part is going to be, where do you go from here? So, until next time!